Thank you, my engineer. Welcome. What's going on? I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez. What's going on is I was muted. If you were wondering, you're watching our show here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. My host today my guest today is CJ Hopkins, playwright, satirist, poet, and also you would say the mind behind consentfactory.org, which I should give you the tagline here: manufacturing consent for over 250 years. I can't get the Don Pardo sound right.
I think, Hugo, maybe you should go with more of a really woke kind of NPR type voice, like the one they use for, Geico,
Maybe
providing insurance to the woke and on the Upper West Side for over 20 years or so. Yeah, maybe go with the NPR woke voice.
Yeah, I'll work on that. But anyhow, this is the trifecta show. This is the third show of a series that we've been doing, and I wanted to have you back on. Well, would you like to say hello? Even though you're
hello.
Kind of, so I wanted to have you back to basically touch base after the inauguration. I wanted to check in, and I think at the time in the emails you had said something like, we didn't know if the place would still be here, and you were pretty close. You were pretty close in as far as what happened on January 6th, let alone on the 20th. But again, because your perspective of your satirist, you're very up on the and news. I think that's off the beaten path as well. And you're also an expat, and you're living in Berlin, which you insist is no different than Middle America, USA. But I'm just kind of interested. What was the experience from the other side of the Atlantic on January 6th? What did people think was going to happen?
Well, what did people think, or what did I think?
You can talk about both you and the media.
Yeah, in terms of people, the masses, the general population, and everything. I mean, we talked about this last time. The zeitgeist or whatever in Berlin kind of mirrors what's happening, on the east and west coasts of the U.S. pretty closely. So, of course, after the storming of the Capitol, people were, up in arms, and the U.S. government had almost, been taken over, by, Viking horn hat guy, and democracy was, hanging by a thread, and luckily, this insurrection was, thwarted, and democracy was saved. I think the big headline in the European papers, in the Guardian at least, was democracy has prevailed, against a couple of hundred guys who had no idea what they were doing and just sort of wandered around in the Capitol building for a while. And a few of them got rowdy and started banging on stuff. And, a poor lady got herself shot and killed. But from my perspective, it was really just bizarre. I think we've arrived at a point where literally, 90% of the mainstream media, the establishment media, was treating this event as if it were an actual attempted coup, or, some sort of legitimate attempted insurrection, as if this ragtag gang, had any chance of taking over the United States government. Or anything like that. So it was just completely bizarre to me to watch the coverage of it in comparison to what the actual event was.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is because, you had the coverage going on, but you also then had security cameras that were catching what was actually going on inside. And you're right that it did. It looked like folks were like, they didn't know what to do with the place once they got their hands on it. But to be fair, all of the representatives, all the senators and Congress people, were I don't want the phrase, but they were being protected. They were hiding in the bowels of the Capitol, wherever they went to, in order to not, because look, guys were, you saw that people were carrying, like the plastic handcuffs. I think one guy had a cattle prod. There's been investigations now which suggest that some of these folks had gotten tours of the facility ahead of time, even interestingly went to offices that were not like the main office where a representative's name might be on the wall, but went to the secondary office where they typically hang out. So yeah, the majority of the people that got into the building, right, didn't know what to do with themselves once they got in there. But there seemed to be some people in there, and so let's turn it around. If let's say they had gotten their hands on Nancy Pelosi or AOC, would we have been looking at some sort of hostage situation or something like that?
So you think these guys had a total death wish? They're
I don't know,
they're
but the problem
they're
is that people get worked up, and I have been, I was reading in your, again, reading on the website consentfactory.org. Am I supposed to say the phrase about manufacturing consent?
no,
Does it
don't
have
worry
to do
about it.
that?
You don't have
Every
to
time I
say.
mention it, you talked about that you listened to or you read through the entire Trump speech, and that
Yeah.
there's nothing in there that says go take the Capitol building or anything like that. And you're right. I looked through it as well, which is very painful. It was like, well,
It's
an hour.
one of the
It's
most painful 15 minutes that I've ever spent in my life trying to read through. I don't know, 8 or 9 pages of this man's word salad. It's
well, it was
just
almost a minute.
utterly, it's
Yeah,
gibberish.
and I did my Evelyn Wood speed reading to try looking for key phrases. But you're right. I don't think that I did not. Let's put it this way: I did not find anything that said "Go take the Capitol." Uh, but well, so I don't know. I don't know if we're going to get into the impeachment today about it, but these
Hugo,
people were worked up, and worked up in many other ways, right? These people, and so you get worked up, and you're somebody that is a reactionary as a personality. You own guns. You have certain ideas. I mean, you're fed Fox television day and night.
yeah,
Uh,
did anybody have guns? Any of them have guns in the Capitol?
that I'm aware of.
No.
Yeah, I'm not aware of.
No, I'm just, let's just back down for a second and just look at the reality, and this is the part that I find so bizarre is that we even have to, to do this, right? So we're talking about, and let's leave aside all of the other stuff, because I've seen a bunch of stuff about this, and, I don't know the details of what happened. I'm over here in Berlin, right? But there's also plenty of evidence that there were agents provocateur in there, and it wasn't purely a bunch of worked up Trump supporters. But let's say it was. Let's say it was just all angry, worked up, Trump supporters who were going to storm the Capitol building, right? So we're talking about a few hundred unarmed, worked up Trump supporters who are going to storm into the Capitol building and, try to, let's assume the worst, like you were saying. They're going to try to find, Pelosi and some Congress people, and, they're going to take them hostage and demand that Trump be, reinstalled.
Hank Pence.
And so on. How is this going to end? So these few hundred worked up Trump supporters are going to go against the entire U.S. military, the U.S. military industrial complex, the intelligence agencies of the United States, every policeman in the U.S. Capitol, and they're going to do this with no weapons. Yeah, and somehow they're going to overthrow the U.S. government and reinstall Donald Trump. It's just, Hugo, the idea is just so ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't think that that's really what I was getting at, the plausibility of them actually overthrowing the government, as much as, the severity of what happened and what could have happened if a couple of things went wrong. I mean, there's the understanding that the ballots that had to be counted were picked up by, an assistant who grateful. It's like it's reminiscent of like Dolly Madison, like wrapping up the Declaration of Independence on her way out the door, before the British burned the building down. In some sense, like, so I'm just saying that things, things
Wait.
got
Let's talk.
ugly. Things got
Okay.
ugly. It
Well,
could have been
wait.
worse.
Let's talk about the ballots, because this is all, all of this is very theatrical, but again, what were these people going to do? Were they going to steal the ballots and somehow change the ballots so that Trump would have won, or destroy the ballots that couldn't be recreated? Or, it's just the whole idea. To me, the whole idea echoes the entire Trump presidency. Just the whole idea that these few hundred, worked up people, had had power that was, even remotely capable of threatening the United States government is crazy. It's a bunch of worked up people who broke into the Capitol and started running around, taking pictures and behaving wildly. Say what you want about that, but the way it is being portrayed as an actual, and I read all the media coverage, they were using phrases like an attempted coup, insurrection, sedition,
Well, by definition,
now,
you
and
can't
now
call it attempt, whether how
let me just
successful. You know what I mean?
let me just finish this. And now they're going to have this show trial, right? This show trial where they impeach Trump again for inciting insurrection. And I'm sorry, but this whole presentation is so completely divorced from the obvious reality that it's just absolutely bizarre to me.
Yeah, I don't expect much to come from the impeachment, particularly, like you said. I think it's going to be a hard case to make that he basically, ordered these folks to go do that. The text doesn't hold up,
Can,
and we know that
can,
the Republicans aren't going to vote that way anyway, right?
can we just stop and focus on this for 1 second, please? You're talking about the sitting president of the United States with the nuclear football, who is the commander in chief of the entirety of the U.S. military. And his plan, okay, his plan to overthrow the government and install himself as dictator, right? His plan is not to use the U.S. military, which he's commander in chief of, or threaten anyone with his nuclear footballs or anything like this. No, his plan is to rile up 200 or 300 rabid Trump supporters and have them rush into the Capitol building with Viking horn hats. That's his big plan. To take control of the government.
Well, I mean, he was obviously behind the scenes. He was obviously doing other things. I mean, talking about replacing folks in the Justice Department and things like that in order to his last ditch attempts at trying to hold on to the presidency.
None of which had a chance of succeeding ever. And
gratefully, but and by the way, I would say you talk about the U.S. military, stopping folks. I mean, there has been talk about the fact that, folks who are in the crowd were former U.S. military, or even possibly in the military now, and then also the numbers of folks, people you use the phrase extremists, which is the phrase that have been used. For example, white nationalist extremists, the FBI is saying is the greatest threat to the United States government at this time, but that there are many in the military who see it this way. I mean, you saw that there is evidence that the guards from the Capitol Guards actually helped folks get into, or let people through, or even gave them directions and took pictures with them. So this idea that the military is just one lockstep group of people is not the case. That there are some people who are sympathetic and armed and dangerous and whatever you want to call them. So, but maybe we should move on because it's become
Well,
too laughable
let's
to talk
let's
about.
not though, because I want to make another point. It's and you ask about Berlin and Europe a lot, and I want to make another point. And and I made it in one of my recent columns. Is on August 29th in Berlin, there was actually a dress rehearsal for this storming of the Capitol, which I don't know how many Americans were paying attention to it, because a lot of Americans don't tend to pay attention to what's happening in Europe. But on the 29th of August here in Berlin, there was a massive protest against the coronavirus restrictions and emergency measures. And tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of us, I was there in the big protest, marched through the city. They banned it, and then the courts overturned it, and they had to let it go, and they tried to stop it again. Anyway, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people in this huge, demonstration that lasted all day against the coronavirus restrictions. And off to the side, where we were was on the main street that runs from the Brandenburg Gate to the Victory Tower, right? And just off to the side of that is the Reichstag, the parliament, the German parliament, right? What the German government did on that day, this was after spending weeks in using the German media to broadcast the message that all of the protesters who were coming out to these protests, we were all a bunch of Nazi conspiracy theorists, all right? We're all a bunch of dangerous right-wing extremists and conspiracy theorists and anti-vaxxer freaks, right? This is in the media for weeks before the protest. Then what the German government did was they granted a separate protest permit, right? A separate protest permit to an ex-member of the NPD, which is literally the neo-Nazi party that was banned in Germany, right? So an ex-neo-Nazi, well-known ex-neo-Nazi, was granted a separate protest permit to hold a little protest directly in front of the German parliament, directly in front of the Reichstag, which they did, right? Separate from the main protest where we all were, right? And what do you know? At that protest, that little protest in front of the Reichstag, the police, who normally protect the hell out of the Reichstag every day of the year, they decided they would stand back about 100 feet away from this protest. And then what do you know? One of the speakers at this little protest got everybody riled up, and they all stormed up the steps of the Reichstag and tried to break into the German Capitol, the German parliament building. Right? And of course, once they got up to the steps, then all the police came rushing in, and then there was a big scuffle, and the police drove them all back, and the media just happened to be right there to film it all right? And then for 2 weeks afterwards, what was in the headlines every day was not the big peaceful protest that was mostly full of old gray folks like me. No, the headlines day after day were the storming of the Reichstag. It's literally in words. Right? The storming of the Reichstag, which was made possible by the German government granting a protest permit to an ex-Nazi to have a bunch of extremists in front of, you could call me a conspiracy theorist if you want, but it's pretty easy to do. It doesn't take a big conspiracy. You just let a bunch of people storm into the building, get the cameras rolling, and whoa, it's the burning of the Reichstag again. It's the storming of the Capitol. The exact same scenario was done then, and it was repeated. I was watching the storming of the Capitol on the 6th, and I was watching the exact same event play out that I had been witness to here in
Except
Berlin.
the police didn't sweep in immediately. And in fact, another thing that Trump is accused of is failing to call out the National Guard to immediately help out the Capitol Police and that situation. There was nothing coming out of the White House during that very long, news moment. Because I was watching, and that's one of the things they talked about. Nothing was coming out of the White House. But maybe we should move on and talk a little bit about. I wanted to talk about after the inauguration. And part of that was just to see if it was going to go off without a hitch, which in some sense it did, though obviously
the inauguration itself, you mean?
Yeah, the inauguration itself, even though, it looked like a military camp in order to protect folks
It
who were
looked like a
involved.
it looked like a military occupation
Right.
because that's what it was.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they cordoned everything off. Right.
Yeah, and occupied the city with, tens of thousands of soldiers. It
After what
looked
happened.
yeah, absolutely, because you don't know when, 200 or 300 angry folks are going to come in and, and do battle with, 30,000-40,000 armed National Guardsmen.
Well, that's the whole point. You have those National Guards is to dissuade that kind of thinking.
Okay.
So anyhow, the inauguration goes off without a hitch, and things are starting to happen in the Biden president. I got to tell you, it's night and day. At least in the media, it's night and day, because every day you've got somebody talking to you about what the administration is doing, as opposed to what was happening previously. Now, I know that maybe you don't want to talk about this, because for you don't see a difference between a Republican or a Democratic, running the White House. I mean, Trump is obviously an anomaly, right?
Right.
But,
that's the point, and that's the point. Normally, there isn't a big difference.
right.
And what happened is, I'm sure it's night and day. I've seen some of the coverage. I've seen, the news anchors, the objective news anchors, like in tears, weeping because it's so beautiful that Biden is, that Trump is finally gone and Biden is back, and and just using the most embarrassing, obsequious language to celebrate.
So you think that that's not legit? Are you telling me that they're putting that on?
No, I absolutely. Everyone, Globocap is so thrilled, that finally this unauthorized president is gone and normality can be restored finally. And Biden can, appoint every corporate, hack and operator, and normality can be reassembled. And yes, normally it doesn't matter really whether there's a Democrat or a Republican, because it's the same folks, running everything. Trump was an anomaly. He was an unauthorized president. Nobody gave him permission to be president. And what they've just done, it's what I've been writing about. It's what I've been writing about for 4 years, and recently in my last columns, is, the whole point from the beginning of the Trump presidency until now was to make an example of this unauthorized president, to utterly demonize him, utterly humiliate him, get him out of office after one term, restore normality, and just celebrate, democracy is back. Finally, this threat, this demonic, monstrous threat, this guy who never had, this bozo who never had any real power to do anything. From the beginning, you're right. Finally, we've defeated, the Antichrist, and now we'll have a big celebration. I've been writing this scenario, Hugo, for 4 years. I started writing exactly this scenario 4 years ago, and here it is. I'm not a prophet. It's not a wonder. I've been writing it because it's been obvious, for 4 years, and now we're getting the big celebrations, and now normality is being restored. And the corporate media is like, yes, everything is wonderful again. Liberals can go back to sleep, right? Because, we're back. Yeah.
I guess that's not the experience I'm having with what I'm watching. I mean, I think about the fact that during the Trump administration, he appointed 3 Supreme Court justices, the last one being particularly problematic as far as how she's going to vote for Roe v. Wade. Since Biden taking the office, has written quite a few presidential, mandates to reverse Trump policies. So I could see how,
and look how easy that was.
What do you mean getting it? But that's the thing, is you can't run the government on presidential mandate for everything. And one of the things we're coming into now is that since the Senate is divided as it is, that the House isn't as democratic as they'd like it to be, to pass legislation the country needs, for economic purposes. Let's talk about what we're going through, because obviously the pandemic has the health impact and the economic impact that it's not going to be that easy to do. And not to mention some of the folks that are now in office have some very right. So I don't know. It may seem like it doesn't matter.
Your signal's breaking up. Your signal's breaking up.
Is it my signal or your signal?
I'm sorry,
Mr. Pope.
Well, somebody's signal. I didn't get all of what you were saying. But Hugo, let me just make this point, because
before the station break.
I'm not a Trump fan. Sorry?
Before the station break.
Yeah, I'm not a Trump fan. I'm not a partisan of the Republicans. I'm not a partisan of the Democrats. None of that. What I'm talking about, you're talking about Supreme Court justices. You're talking about, Trump directives that now Biden is reversing and so on. What I'm talking about is this man was portrayed as a Russian intelligence asset and literally the reincarnation of Adolf Hitler for 4 solid years. Okay, and everyone was brainwashed into thinking that, when he lost the election, he was going to literally stage a coup and take over the government and form a dictatorship. Right. So that's what I'm focusing on. I'm not focusing on, Supreme Court justices and policies and directives. I'm talking about the massive propaganda campaign, that was put out for 4 solid years, culminating in this little theater that we just experienced, right? And this big celebration of the return of democracy. It's the disjunction between that propaganda show and the actual reality of the situation is so huge that it just boggles my mind. It makes my jaw drop. Do you have to do a station identification?
I do. It's 1:30. You're watching What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. My guest is CJ Hopkins, satirist, playwright, poet, filmmaker, and hangs his shingle as the consentfactory.org. Manufacturing consent for over 250 years. That's as close as I'm going to get to being an NPR show host.
Don't worry about it.
We're talking about the post-insurrection, post-inauguration situation here, and so let's.
I gotta just make one more point.
Go right ahead.
Yeah. So post attempted coup, all right, and the tens of thousands of soldiers occupying Washington, D.C., and nobody's allowed to come to the inauguration and all of this, and barbed wire fences around the White House and the Capitol and all of that. And as far as I know, D.C. is still under military occupation, right? Also, the media went crazy for a few days and saying, oh, no, it's not just D.C., the Putin Nazis, as I like to call them, this mythical, white supremacist army that Trump has that is, integrated into the military, and they're all hiding, in their mother's basements. And they're all going to rise up, and take over America any minute. The media jumped out and said, okay, now this white supremacist extremist army, they're going to attack all of the capitals in the country. Right. So in California and, New York and everywhere. So it wasn't just D.C. They rolled the soldiers out to protect the capitals all over the country. Right. Well,
that was
Hugo in California, for example, 2 guys showed up. There are pictures of them. I can find them and send you. There's literally big fences around the Capitol building and 1 Trump supporter with his hat standing around outside. They interviewed the guy and he's like, I thought more people would be coming. It's literally 1 guy with a MAGA hat standing outside of the Capitol. It's, after all this hype and after all this propaganda, don't liberals, don't they at least demand to see some evidence of this monstrous, white supremacist force that Trump was going to take over the entire United States with? Of course there are neo-Nazis. Of course there are white supremacists and racists and all these idiots. There always have been. But they've been blown up into this huge mythical force that is somehow has the power to threaten the United States government,
Well, let's
which
say
is insane. It's insane.
the best way to stop force is to show force, some people would say, right? Is that an Orwellian phrase I've just kind of come up with on my own there? I'm just
No,
saying, like, if the folks who showed up at the Capitol and got in, got lucky, but once folks were prepared for them, why would you show up to something? It's like the Viet Cong. They threatened the Tet Offensive for many years, and finally, when they put the U.S. military to sleep, is when they attacked. But I wanted to kind of take a moment because. And the folks who have been watching the show maybe know what you're talking about when they. By the way, I just texted my daughter who lives in D.C. to ask her if it's still under military occupation, and she's saying semi. That's her answer. But anyhow, so your thesis, or what you kind of run your shop with, is this notion that, or the idea that, really, global capitalism is obviously changing life as we know it for most folks, that Trump was a symptom of the kind of a populist backlash trying to fight against that. And but now global cap has is back in business fully. Nobody to stop them again in that sense, certainly in the United States. How should sentient, people who care about life on this planet, how should we behave in the face of something that overwhelming, the tsunami of global cap? How do we deal with that?
Well, the first thing I think to do is, turn off the Rachel Maddow, turn off the Fox News while you're at it too, turn off the corporate media, the mainstream media, and actually go back and look at history and dig into what the actual forces at play in our world are. I mean, it's really, it can be a pretty simple story, right? You and I were born during the Cold War, right? When there was still a USSR, and then the Soviet Union dissolved, 1989 and the early 90s, right? And it was the end of the Cold War. And this was the end of really the last ideological conflict that global capitalism was facing, right? At that point during the Cold War, it was basically capitalism over here and, socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it, over here.
Yeah,
right?
and it was a moment of crisis.
This was the big ideological conflict, right? And the last adversary, the last ideological to global capitalism dissolved. And starting in the early 1990s, right? Well, since the early 1990s, we have been living in a world which is dominated by a single ideological system. And the name of that system is global capitalism, right? It's, China's a part of it. It's every country on the earth is part of it. It is the global hegemonic system. What has it been doing since the early 1990s? If you go back and track it historically, it's pretty clear, right? Starting in the early 1990s, no more Soviet adversary, so we own the entire world. So what are we going to do? We need to go in and clean up all these little pockets of resistance that are left over from the Cold War. Like the Middle East is a problem. We need to go in and clean that up, mop up that area. Yeah, so a lot of attention was spent, has been spent cleaning up the Middle East. They also spent some time cleaning up the former Soviet countries in Yugoslavia and what have you. Right? And that's what they've been doing since the 1990s, right? And of course, it makes sense. You've got the whole world. Now you can concentrate on these little pockets of resistance and clean these up.
Was Osama bin Laden and 9/11 kind of a populist backlash and unfortunate You know?
I really don't want to dig into the whole can of worms of 9/11, but let's
Right,
just say the war on terror, right?
right.
Because Osama is, a part of that. The entire war on terror, the 16-year war on terror that lasted exactly until the summer when Trump won the nomination, and then they turned it off. Right? They switched off the war on terror. And I documented this in one of my essays. That summer was the summer of terror, the summer of fear. It was in the media, right? And there were all these lone wolf terrorist attacks. They were coming, and it was the summer of fear. And then Trump won the nomination, and the war on terror disappeared. And suddenly we were fighting, this resurgence of fascism and white supremacy and the Russians, and it switched, right?
In the mainstream media.
Yes, but getting back to what I was saying, this whole war on terror, Globocap has been destabilizing and restructuring the Middle East, a very, very valuable region, since the early 1990s, since the end of the Soviet Union. And of course it has. It needs to wipe out this religious fundamentalist resistance, which is a resistance to global capitalism, right? And then what happened around 2015, 2016 is this populism started rising up in, Western Europe, in the US, what have you. It led to Brexit. It led to Donald Trump. And global capitalism realized, damn, we've got a populist insurgency problem happening right here at home. So let's put the Middle East on hold for a while and quash this populist rebellion and teach these people a lesson about who's in charge and what happens when you vote to leave the European Union, or you elect some unauthorized bozo like Donald Trump, who nobody gave permission to be president. Well, here's what happens, right? We demonize your hero, as a Russian intelligence asset and literally Adolf Hitler, and we demonize you as racist, white supremacist, extremist Nazis. Yeah, and we do that for 4 years. Then we dump your guy, and then we launch a whole new war on domestic terror. You're aware that this is happening, right? Yeah,
Well, it's certainly an expressed concern.
Yeah, and the Department of Homeland Security has just rolled out a whole new program, and now the war on domestic terror is coming, right? And this includes all sorts of extremists. It's the neo-Nazis and the Republicans and even libertarians. Libertarians are now extremists that need to go on the list, right? And so now we can resume the war on terror. We just need to include the domestic terrorists. It's that basically anybody who isn't towing the line and playing the ball is going to be an extremist from now on.
Well, so what do you think of the people who watch Fox and believe it? Like my sister, or like some guy in a parking lot in the town next to me who wanted to go get his gun because somebody had a Biden sticker on his bumper.
God help them is what I think. But getting back to what you were saying,
we have questions, by the way, on the stream. If you want to answer them in about 4 minutes.
Let me try to answer your question though. Yeah, what I think the most dangerous thing, the most dangerous part of where we are, right, is that people are so lost in the manufactured hysteria that is being pumped out from all sides, okay? It's not just the Globocap side. Fox News is all pumping it. The right-wing folks are all crazy. They think China is going to take us over, which is just as ridiculous as the, right? People are so lost in this mass hysteria that they're missing the simple dynamics, the simple geopolitical dynamics of where we are, right? And we went through a big transition in the early 90s. Global capitalism became our single system. And what we're watching now, and what we should be watching now, is the exercise of a globally hegemonous system trying to maintain and increase its power and control over its territory. And it's really that simple. When you look at it through that lens, everything kind of makes sense. That's my answer. My answer is what we should be doing is turn the TV off and start investigating what's actually happening, right? Trying to understand the world that we actually live in and who runs it.
All right. I'm going to actually go to questions because, first of all, we rarely get them. It must have something to do with the fact that you put a bulletin out on your site that this was happening. So we've got Simon here in London. Does that sound familiar?
Sounds,
No.
yeah, I know some
Okay.
Simons in London.
So he's saying, will the fences stay up around the Capitol, and if so, for how long? Myanmar suffered a military coup today to preserve democracy, in quotation marks. Have the Democrats done the same? I mean, you've already admitted you don't know what's going on in D.C. except what you read. My daughter's telling me there's a semi, but I guess the question becomes,
The fences are still up.
yeah, even if they're symbolically.
The soldiers, well, symbolically, they're either up or they're not up.
Physically not. Well, I'm just saying, well,
There
there's
are
other
there are
ways.
fences.
There's a lot of kinds of fences, right?
There are fences with razor wire.
Right.
There are fences with razor wire surrounding the U.S. Capitol. It's not, yes, it's symbolic, but they're also literally fences with razor wire and armed, troops. I don't think this can be maintained. I don't think this, and I don't think it is meant to be maintained. I think right now we're in this period of, emergency and of acute crisis. And once this part of the show is over, I think that they will step things back, because global capitalism just really doesn't work at this full-blown totalitarian level that we're at now. Right? It requires the illusion of freedom. They need people to, go back to sleep and quit paying attention to politics and, quit paying attention to how many people we're slaughtering in the Middle East and, other places in the world. They need people to relax and go shopping. Right? And that's hard to do when the Capitol is surrounded by razor wire and everybody's locked down in their home. So I think, to answer Simon's question, I think this will be gradually stepped down, but I think they need to do their show trial first.
Also, now we've got Dharma Built saying, regardless of the characteristics of the events on January 20th, 2021, what of problem, reaction, solution? Hegelian dialectic, which makes me feel like there's a college thing going on here, right?
Sure.
What is happening now? Then now is in big letters. Military buildup and fortifications in the capital, Patriot Act 2.0, all dissent labeled domestic terrorism in the mainstream media, etc. What of that? Where is all that going?
Yeah, as it's kind of the same answer that I just had to Simon's question is,
right.
I think if you look back at how the world changed after September 11th and how the war on terror was rolled out, right? There was that initial period where the powers that be had to whip everybody up into a state of mass hysteria where they were ready to, do anything, right? It's like, yeah, sure, nuke, Iraq, who cares, whatever, attack somebody. We're still in that period of mass hysteria where all of the big changes are put into place, and then things get dialed down, and then, okay, no, you can go fly again. You just got to take your shoes off and let our cops grope your kids and, and stuff. And people get used to that. I think we're looking at my guess is that what we're facing is seriously increased levels of control, seriously increased suppression of dissent. This has been going on, Hugo. They're censoring me, and I'm a satirist, for God's sakes.
Who's censoring you?
Facebook. The big internet companies are deplatforming people and censoring people. I don't know if you're aware of this. There's just a massive censorship push going on. Glenn Greenwald wrote a good piece about it. I can refer you to that. I think these repressive measures will continue, but at a lower level. I don't think they can stay at this intense level that we're at right now. I think they'll be dialed down a bit.
One thing we didn't touch on, but you posted something on Facebook today, actually, concerning the pandemic, which is, it's kind of amazing that it's something we're not talking about as part of all of this. I just mentioned to the economic piece of it. But you were saying in your piece in Germany, you were showing that they are, what are they, sequestering folks who refuse to social distance? Is that what's, or refusing to wear masks?
Well, today's the day that it started. And let me just give you a little context, because this also speaks to the point that I was making earlier, Hugo, is the distance, the disjunction between the mass hysteria and the propaganda that is being pumped out and the actual facts and the actual reality on the ground. You can go look at the numbers and see, how Germany has been affected, by the virus, right? And I'll stipulate, yes, there's a virus. Yes, it can be nasty for old people and what, and for a small minority of people. But if you go look at the numbers, right, and see how many people have died or been infected, in Germany by this virus, and then compare that to where we are. They've passed, basically a new, Ermächtigungsgesetz, which gives the government dictatorial power to do anything it wants as long as it says that it's doing it to combat the virus, right? So protests are banned. The police are able to enter people's homes, without any kind of due process, with any kind of warrants whatsoever. I saw a video today of, police chasing people down, out in a snowy field. The police running them down, chasing them down because they're not wearing their mask in a snowy field outdoors. And yes, today they opened the first camps to house quarantine objectors, right? So they're opening camps. You're laughing, but this is Germany. And they're opening camps all around the country to intern people, right, who object to quarantine or who disobey the COVID restrictions. They're going to put them in camps with fences, with barbed wire, with guards in Germany, right? Now, compare that to the actual threat of whatever this virus is, and your jaw will drop. There's absolutely no way that what this virus actually is justifies any of these insane totalitarian measures that have been rolled out. I'll say the word again, just because people don't seem to be able to get it. Internment camps. That's right. What they're setting up in Germany.
For me, I think what it is that when governments, people start panicking, they tend to make some bad decisions, and sounds like that's what's going on. It's kind of hard because here in the United States, I don't know what it's like in Germany, but here in the United States, the real issue is the pressure it's putting on the medical industry, the industry, the care industry to be able. I mean, I hear it from people that are in the business. I'm not getting it from the media, of what they're going through, of the overwhelming, particularly in the inner cities, particularly in areas where people don't typically have access to healthcare, and so there's a lot of fear about can we hold up to what we're going through, and obviously the vaccine is coming out, and all of the things that are happening about vaccine, who gets to have it, who gets it first, how many do you get? Do you get them both? Do you get, so people are just very frightened, and I don't think people make good decisions when they're scared. That's, having said that,
I'm gonna just say
I'm frightened by what you're talking. I am frightened by what you're talking about.
I'm gonna say it again.
You got to understand that you also live in a hyperbolic world. All right.
Hugo, I'm gonna say it again. There's nothing
right.
There's nothing hyperbolic about it. These are not hyperbolic camps.
Okay.
These are not hyperbolic camps. They're actual camps. I'll send you a picture. Camps with fences.
I got it.
With barbed, yeah. There's nothing hyperbolic about this. People can call me a conspiracy theorist. You can say everybody's scared or whatever. I'm going to say it again. Internment camps. Okay, I'm talking police raiding people's homes, and it's not just in Germany. I can send you videos of Scotland, police neighbors calling up and saying, oh, I think my neighbor is having a party. And the police show up and brutalize a family in their home, right? Brutalize a family in their home because the neighbor called up and said, I think there's too many people in this house. It's these examples, Hugo, I have been logging these examples for over 10 months. I've been doing it since March 2020, right? And people have been saying, oh, you're being hyperbolic, you're exaggerating, oh, you're this. There are links in all of my essays. There are links to the actual stories, not from conspiracy theorist sites, but from the mainstream media that everybody believes. Don't cut me off yet, let me finish. I've got links to I've been documenting this totalitarian behavior. It started in France and Spain, with the cops, stopping people who were leaving their homes without permission, papers, please, and arresting them for being outside without permission. And okay, 10, 11 months later, we are at the point where internment camps in Germany, okay? A government in Germany which has been given dictatorial power, carte blanche, to do anything it wants in the name of protecting the public health. Okay, and at this point, I realize people are scared. I have empathy for the people who are scared, but internment camps. Okay, I want to try to get that through to people.
Is that what they're calling it?
No, they're called internment facilities.
Okay, so they do use the word internment. Chris, we've got about 6 minutes, and there's got to be some music in part of that. And usually we say goodbye, but I have another guest that I've been bringing in as part of the political thing, Dr. Clarence Taylor, who started African American studies at CUNY, and he's been another voice. And I'm going to have him back after the first 100 days, the Biden first 100 days. I don't know if you have any interest in that, but I'd be interested in having you both on at the same time because you're both smart guys, smarter than I am, particularly about these issues. And I'm interested in seeing how the two of you would interact together and sharing. He agrees with you about the neoliberal agenda of the Clinton years, and he's totally on board for that. I'd be interested in talking about the first 100. So if that's something that you'd be willing to do, we should talk about it.
I'd be happy to. You have to give me a couple of days notice. I don't usually follow, the ins and the specific ins and outs of any administration. I didn't do it with Trump, and I probably won't do it with Biden. But
right.
Yeah,
I think we may have already picked a date, which may be in April, because that's 100 days, and I can't remember what it was. The 26th of April. So
sounds good to me. I'd love to speak with him. And
because I really feel like you're both really smart guys. You both have a lot of deep understanding about things. His historically, yours with the media, though he obviously watches the media as well. So I'd be interested to see how the two of you play off each other, and I can kind of sit back a little bit and just throw in my whatever.
Sounds great.
Cents. But yeah, I just want to any last words, because we're almost. By the way, Jamie Riccio is telling us the Germans who keep refusing to quarantine could be put into. So she's also seeing the same on the Telegraph. But so it's legit. Any last word? Any last things you want to say before we're done here?
Yeah, I don't know what to say. The thing that scares me more than anything right now, especially about the whole COVID narrative that's going around. I said it to a friend that I was arguing with the other day. Is at this point, people are split into two completely separate realities. There's the vast majority of people are on board with the official narrative reality, and that's what the way they're perceiving the world, and a minority of us, are on board with a different reality. And the reality that, we're looking at, we actually have, some facts that we're looking looking at. For example, take a look at overall age-adjusted mortality for 2020 when you get a chance. But that's not the point. The point is we're actually split into these two separate realities, and there really isn't much crossover other than just shouting at each other anymore. There's really no way to get through. And the point that I'm trying to make, because I come from the minority reality, right? And I was trying to make this point to my friend from the majority reality. He was saying he doesn't understand our anger. He doesn't understand why we're so angry. And I said, try to think of it this way, right? What our experience is that you guys in your reality, you're coming to us and shouting at us and demanding that we do things, right, that correspond to your ideological beliefs, right, that we don't share. You're telling us wear masks, stay inside, quarantine, do this, blah, blah, you have all these restrictions for us, right? Okay, we're over here with our ideological reality, which you don't share, but we're not asking you to do anything. We're just asking you to leave us alone and stop coming at us with cops and putting us in camps and, barging into our homes and forcing us to, dress up like we're in a hospital, right? If you guys want to do that, great, God love you. Wear your masks, wear 7 masks, social distance, do whatever you want, right? We're not asking you to change anything from what you believe. We're just asking you to leave us alone and stop trying to punish us because we don't believe in the story that you believe in, right? That's where our anger is coming from, right? Our anger is it's not about trying to get you to do anything. It's about trying to get you to stop forcing us to do things so that they match up with your reality. If that helps people on that side of the debate at all to understand, right? We're the ones that are catching the force coming at us, right?
Right. We're gonna have to leave it at that. The show is What's Going On, and my guest today has been C.J. Hopkins, satirist, playwright, poet, filmmaker, and manufacturing consent for 250 years. The consentfactory.org is his vehicle, as well as his publications that he's one coming out in German now. So look for those as well. I just want to thank him and my friend, regardless.
Forever.
Thank you again for being on. You win it'll be like Saturday Night Live where you're on the 3-time on the show jacket that you'll get. I've been your host, Hugo Fernandez, here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And Mr. Pope, take us out as we came in. Bye.